Alright, YouTube, if you don't know who David Brock is, you should Google him and be prepared to lose your lunch because he's so hideously deformed. He looks like a sack of slightly leathery corned beef was taken out in strips and plastered over a human face. He's like, I don't know what the fuck his skin problem is. And look at his hairstyle, and then you'll probably have to make a comparison to the Ancient Aliens dude if the Ancient Aliens dude were absolutely hideous. So that's David Brock. Now, what does he do in his life, you may ask? Well, he's the leader of Correct the Record, which is essentially an organized group of shills where David Brock and others solicit donations and do fundraisers or what the fuck ever. And then they pay people to post a bunch of bullshit on social media and try to call it political activism. Now, CTR, the first myth about CTR is that they're not really active. They actually are. I've encountered groups like this before because I actually worked for one. Now, nothing political. When I was in UVM, I worked in student alumni calling. It's essentially a glorified telemarketer position where you make maybe a little bit more money than the average telemarketer. It was alright, I guess. It's kind of shifty and it really helps your propaganda skills, though. You see what kind of scripts they use. Online, it's fundamentally similar to the same principle that you would use when telemarketing. You're trying to get better and better. You're using experimentation in some cases alongside your activities in order to see what people's response is to certain things you can say, certain indicators you can give them, certain sources you can use, and so forth. You rebuild the script over time as new news and so forth come to light, as new experimentation takes place. And then you go shit it up on whatever site you happen to be targeting. The second myth is that they don't operate on 4chan. I assure you that they do, because I've seen them using their scripts on there. Some of these people, the difficulty with detecting shills now is that trolls have done the same thing for a long time without being paid to do so. So you see, for instance, the Canadian shitposter, who I believe his thing is something along the lines of, how did Trump win? Because only suburban and rural retards voted for him. All the smart urban individuals voted for Hillary Clinton. It's impossible to identify whether this is a CTR shill, who's literally paid to post this, realizes that because it's identified as shitposting, people think it's less malicious, they're more responsive to it, and he's just gobbling up the dough from the responses he gets just to shill and derail other threads, to distract from them, to distract from more meaningful content, or whether this person is actually just a shitposter. It's impossible to identify whether it's troll or CTR shill. It's sort of like the concept that a good troll and a true evangelical like zealot nut, you can't tell the difference between the two of them. So they have a systemic advantage when they're posting in any anonymous forum, but I've caught them off of 4chan as well. For instance, there was a poster on Facebook for a long time called Stu Weinstein, who also had several other accounts, same name, all linked together, used elsewhere. He was obviously a paid poster. He was also almost certainly one of the people responsible for using the insult moon unit in online posting elsewhere, not just on 4chan, but other sites. I think it was on Reddit for a while as well, Tumblr, all these other shitty locations. You know, they're not as good as 4chan, but I guess you can get your point across if you really want to there. But I caught him doing that. He was doing that on my channel. On anything related to Israel, if I made a post about it, on any of these news feeds on Facebook and so forth. So it's not clear whether that's CTR side stuff or whether this is just some account that's managed by some Zionist. Because Israel does the same thing. They have literally thousands of people do this. So does the U.S. Air Force. I believe 2 years ago, they ended up making a bunch of sock accounts and bots and so forth and placing them on Facebook and elsewhere. I think they mentioned the number 70,000 or something like that they had to push government propaganda, to push stories that were positive to the U.S. government and that were not positive about, like, the Russians or the Chinese or Iran or something like that. So it happens all the time. State actors do this. Organizations and corporations do this. Social media firms themselves do this in a general sense. Of course, when YouTube pushes one video, all of the competitors of that similar material suffer as the result of it. You don't have to denigrate the competitors in order to actually denigrate them. It's easy. It's essentially being positive but actually being negative at the same time. They know what they're doing. They realize that this is what happens. There's a point to it. Facebook does the same thing. Oh, here, see this top story. Well, all the competing stories, they get demoted in a de facto sense because they're not being promoted to that same level. It's the way that it works. So David Brock is a hideous individual. He's even getting told to fuck himself by many Democrats, though, because CTR, during the election, it's not like there's some all-powerful group of ultimate shills or anything. They're actually fairly weak. They didn't have the impact that a lot of people wanted them to have during the election. There were cases where people claiming to be from CTR were dumping material on 4chan and elsewhere, probably some of which was legitimate, so they've obviously got some cracks in their security clearance or something like that, number two. And David Brock, his name has become poisonous. His brand has become somewhat toxic because of the nature of his work. So a lot of these Democrats are telling him to go fuck himself, to stop trying to help the Democratic Party because it's clearly not working. And this is the nature of shilling. It's the nature of organized, non-organic movements. If you get an organic movement, it's much more effective because there's no single direction to the shitposting. It can morph more freely because, as I've said, in memetics, in propaganda, if it's totally decentralized, there's no central leadership figure, it's all, competing viral images. It's like an evolutionary process, and it moves very quickly. It can move in the span of minutes or hours. Whereas with an organized effort, it can take you a week to dig up more research. By the time that you've conducted it to deploy a new tactic in shilling, it's already outdated. There's a reason that it stopped working. This would be a warning to all these state actors and stuff using the bots and so forth. Those have significant limitations that organic movements don't have. You get a million random trolls and shitposters fucking up some site, they're going to be successful 9 times out of 10. Because they will be able to adapt their tactics very, very quickly. It doesn't require, it's literally just experimentation as they're shitposting, as they're trolling. A bunch of people on some anonymous forum that are sharing memes around. One of them happens to be more popular than the rest and takes off. It gets modified, another modified variant takes off. This can all happen a dozen times in a single day. Whereas with CTR, it costs more because, the decentralized version costs literally nothing, essentially. It costs a lot. It's centrally or semi-centrally organized, which slows down the rate of its progression. And if it comes to light who's participating, those individuals become the butt of every joke. David Brock is a hideous individual. He's meme-worthy himself. Anytime you have someone who might work alongside CTR publicly identified, that becomes a problem, an issue for them. And so you've got all of these, you've got so many problems with trying to shill in this manner. It's useless. Yeah, the Democratic Party is wise to tell him to take a hike, to find a new line of work, to do fucking something else, to just raise money for campaigns and stop with the CTR stuff, because it doesn't actually work. And because it doesn't work, what's the point of being an ally of someone whose own name, if it's associated with your campaign or whatever, is worth less than dirt? But take a look at him. Just go on Google Images and look for David Brock CTR or something. Oh man, I'll have a good time looking at his wild-ass face. He looks a little bit like Mozart or something with that hair. Or maybe Bach or something like that. It looks like he's living in the 1700s. And technologically, he basically is too. He's a Luddite. He's sticking to this sort of early 2000s, late 90s stratagem of how to prop up a political campaign using technology. And it just doesn't work anymore. Clinton learned that the hard way. CTR was part of that learning curve that she never actually managed to take account of. That's about all. Peace out.